is written in such a way that it's extremely simple and to the point. And there's one passage I'm going to share in that psalm this morning and do some thinking with you about that. Even though I walk through the darkest valley, referred to as the valley of death, I fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. Now, I've known a lot of stress in my life. Stress being the oldest son, which placed, in some ways, a certain responsibility on me, and my mother thought I had accomplished that very well, thank you. The stress of examinations, exams that are part of education, and feeling the stress that you have when you come to a test and you know that you haven't studied enough. And you hope that there are a lot of multiple choice questions that say all of the above or none of the above, because you pretty well know which it is. I can recall any number of times in college when I felt a fair amount of stress related to performances. I loved to do drama, and I acted in plays, and I had a wonderful time. And I remember a class that I took, which was a play preparation, and we were responsible to cut out a section from a play, and I did, and I had people come, and they all did well. And I think I'm thinking as I tell you that now, I've told you again, but I was asked to do it in somebody else's cutting, and I forgot the lines. And boy, talk about sweat and stress. And being a talker, I ad-libbed, and I did such a great job, I thought. And the professor who was teaching it said, Mr. Teichmiller, that was a pretty good job of ad-libbing, but you should know that I directed this play this past summer. I can't give the student a perfect grade because you didn't use the right lines. Oh my, stress in doing that, and stress with the student that had asked me to perform. The reality of stress in our world is present. You must imagine, and it's difficult to imagine because we're not under the oppressive experience of having bombs dropping all around us, whether we're in a shopping mall or in a playground or having a child in a maternity unit or on your apartment. But imagine the stress that the people in Ukraine must be feeling. Intense, overwhelming stress. And at some point, I suspect there are those who say, let them have it, let them have it. I want to live, and I hope that they can live without all that stress. There's a recent study that reveals that stress is almost endemic in our society. Stress is intense as we live our lives as Americans in some ways. And maybe that's because we have chosen stress as a way of responding either naturally or intentionally. But stress occurs. 75% of our fellow citizens report feeling stressful at some point every day. At some point every day, 75% of us feel stress. 49% report it on a regular and consistent time over the course of time. 53% say that stress has increased for them in the past number of years. 68% of women report higher levels of stress in their lives, more so than do men. Of course, men are macho and they wouldn't admit that they experience stress. 69% of the stress is as a result of family issues. Those family issues can be the ways in which we live together as a couple, and the stress that we feel sometimes with our children. behavior. I remember Tom saying to me, "Dad, you worry too much." To which I said, "I do, and you're doing a good job of helping me worry." 68% of people say health issues are a stress. And I suspect when you're young, generally speaking, great, I don't have any health issues. And as you get older, you begin to experience issues that you need to deal with, whether it's losing perfect eyesight or any number of other illnesses that come along. 68% of people maintain that they are stressed when thinking about the political conflict and climate in our society. Young adults aged 18 to 29 in the survey reported a higher level of stress than do older adults in their years of retirement. How do we deal with stress? I mean, more recently, we're feeling just an enormous amount of stress around assassination, an enormous amount of stress around those who are angry yet and who, say things that they, I'm sure, afterward wish they hadn't said. But there's a lot of stress that goes on. And I think about stress, and I think about the times I'm reading the Old Testament and the New Testament with the Bible study or in preparation for meditation. And I feel stressed when I think about the conflict between the children of Adam and Eve that results in a death. I think of that stress between Abraham's two children and the jealousy and the outrage they express toward each other. And I began to feel that stress. Well, maybe I'm an exception. I don't think so. I think all of us experience stress. And it's fascinating to me that one of the spiritual gospel songs that we sing is an incredible song that comes out of slavery. And the slaves are listening to the story on Easter, on Good Friday, rather, and in anticipation of Easter. And the African-American, whoever it was, writes this song. And out of the very depth of their feeling, they say, "Oh!" And the "oh" is followed by incredible words of emotion. "Sometimes it causes me to tremble." Not just one tremble, but tremble, tremble, tremble. So we do feel stress. And we feel it in such a way that sometimes it's overwhelming. And by the way, it has its physical impact on us unless we have figured out a way to deal with conflict and a way to deal with the world in which we live, which is filled and pockmarked with all kinds of disaster, tragedy, and death. We are told that it actually can cause issues with blood pressure, issues with heart function. It can contribute toward mental health issues that result sometimes in deep depression. Stress can be an enormously powerful experience on our lives. And one could say, well, how to deal with that? How should we deal with that? And if you don't experience stress at any point in your life, then perhaps you've turned off your cell phone and thrown it away, or you've turned off and sent back the final payment on your cable TV, so you're not going to watch the news anymore. And you've simply gotten off the grid. Well, you're here, so you didn't. You're not off the grid. But there is a way in which we can, as followers of Jesus, deal with stress in a different and unique way. Now, prayer, of course, is essential. But even in our prayers sometimes, whether prayed by me or someone else in our congregation, the prayer is oftentimes about things that are painful and sorrowful and conflicting. And so even our prayer can sometimes contribute to our sense of stress, out of sortness. But prayer is one of the ways for us to move away from the way in which stress can consume us to sharing our concerns with one whom we believe very strongly will hear us. And when I pray, I am convinced that I am not merely talking to myself, but I'm talking to the one who created me, imagined me, and created me, and who gave me life. And I pray to the one who has this marvelous capacity to create unimaginable wonders in the universe and perhaps even yet universes. And why this one, we believe, pays any attention to me or to you or anybody else or as a group, we don't know, except we've been told that God will listen. Now, in the 23rd Psalm, the writer says, I fear no evil. And I translate that to mean I'm not going to be stressed out about evil because I believe that there is one who will care for me. Now, this is a shepherd's story. So if you're not familiar with shepherds and how they functioned, one of the things that was very clear is that they didn't sleep much at night because the wolves and others who were nocturnal in their behavior, because they could see really well and they could consume a sheep or a lamb very quickly. So they stayed awake all night, which was stressful. I had one of those jobs once in college. From 11 till 7, I made solid core doors. Well, I'll tell you that story a different time. But that's stressful, staying awake all night. Or getting up at night when your child cries and you can't get your child to go back to sleep. So the shepherd story is a wonderful story because the psalmist recalls what the shepherd has with him to protect the sheep. Not only his presence and his awakeness at night, but he has a rod and he has a staff. Why those two things? He doesn't mention the slingshot, which can propel a stone at an incredible speed so as to destroy any enemy of the sheep. He has a rod which is like a club, most likely made out of some very hard wood, and that club was used should there be an attack on one of its animals. They could at least have something to club it with. Because in the darkness, the enemy would come and you needed something to club it with, to fight off that enemy. And if you could wound it enough so that it would go and walk away and escape the lethal blows that you could give. So what the psalmist is saying, that this God has one of those clubs. He's there. He will protect us even in the worst occasions when our lives are at risk. God will be there. Now, we may still die, but God will be there to care for us. And then that staff, which is an interesting staff, it has a crook in it, and it's meant for two things. One, to give stability to the shepherd. The shepherd may be 87 as he walks down the pathway. And that crook is there for support and care and nurturing. Even in the midst of stress, that staff is there. It is long, and it can be used to poke at and move two lambs that are fighting one another away from each other. Or if the lamb or the sheep falls into a hole or over the edge of a precipice, is then now stuck there. Instead of trying to climb down and perhaps losing their life as well, you can bring that staff around, get it under the belly of the lamb or the sheep, and pull it back to safety. Simple story. Simple story of a rod and a staff, which are there to protect and to guide. And the belief then is very strong that if you turn to God in all of the situations of life that are stressful, even those which threaten your life, God will be there. Now, it's important to remember that Jesus said that God will be there through you oftentimes. And that the way in which you are there for them in those stressful times and those life-threatening moments, you can assume, if that is someone who comes with a deep faith in God, that God is there too. Jesus said, "You are the body. You are the body of the church, and I'm part of that body. And you and I are together the ones who can respond to the needs of folks out there." Now, we do it in a variety of ways. We make our offering, of course we do. And we use those resources as creatively as we can to bring a message of hope and joy and the love that comes from God. Or it may be that you merely are listening to somebody as they're telling their story of anxiety and fear and stress. And you hear them. And they're not alone anymore because there's somebody who's listening. They're not telling them how to think or telling them what to do, but listening to them. The number of lives that have been saved by people who are deeply depressed and who just needed someone to listen to them, to not tell them how to think or what to believe, but just listen to them. Amazing number. And the ones who are in stressful situations where someone can say, "I hear you. I hear you. My experience may not be like your experience, but I have felt that kind of stress and concern and doubt and fear as well." Coach, that embrace of love, saying to someone, I care enough about you that I'm willing to hug you and let you know that I care about you. And when I do it, I usually make sure I haven't lost my hearing aid in their hair. Yeah, can you imagine that handshake, that recognition, eyeball to eyeball, where you look at a person, the embrace that shows that you really honor that they exist. I've been doing all of the baptisms of our grandchildren, and we've done them with a whole bunch of family gathered together, a handful of friends, and we've done all of them on a lake shore, which has been fun, the same one. And I step into the lake and I hold the baby, and the mom and dad are standing in the lake with me, and we baptize their child in a very special moment. And then I invite others to come and reach down and get some water and baptize with me this child, which is a way of saying, I know that you exist, you are special, you are unique, you are filled with wonder, you have the capacity for great creativity. We're so glad you were born. And you're part of our family, and for that we are delighted. You see, there's so many ways for us to relate to the issues of the world without getting angry, without getting bitter, without wanting to retaliate or to get even. There are so many ways for us to respond to the world in which we live. And unless the atmosphere in the world changes, we're heading toward a very dark hole, where those who think that the only way they can win is to destroy the other person, destroy their ideas, destroy their voice, destroy their life. It's just unacceptable, as you know. So in the midst of stress, right here in this church, in this community, in the larger community, we can be that example of caring, loving, gentle, generous, empathetic, merciful, forgiving, and reconciling people. And we're a mass right here and there on Zoom. But when we depart, we are single persons who can make such a difference in a stressful world. Jesus said, "Go, do it in my name." Amen.